Okay, let's get things started. Might have a few more people joining online or in the room. But yeah, Jason Murphy, Wednesday night, Rebel Dharma. Glad you're here. Thanks for participating. Those of you on Zoom and maybe in the future on YouTube, and those of you in the room. Is there anyone new to the group that wants to introduce themselves? You can just raise your hand or unmute yourself if you're online. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to, my hope today is to, I posted about a kind of a psychological model. So I, blend Buddhism and psychology, really Buddhist psychology, and sometimes I call it Buddhology. Like it's this mix of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy, Buddhist psychology. I really view Buddhism as a psychological model. It's even in the Western view, it would be considered a humanistic or holistic psychological view, and seeing the different kind of aspects of object, subject. There's also a whole kind of philosophical bent to Buddhism. So it's not really, I think this is, of course, my interpretation, that it's not really as religious as it once was considered, particularly brought into the Western world. Although it has, arrived in the States and every other country in some form of religious packaging. Yet I feel like there's been a lot of work and a lot of teachers, kind of contemporary teachers, really kind of folding back the layers of kind of ritualistic, cultural kind of overtones that have been passed down, say like in like Chinese Buddhism or Taiwanese Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism or even Thai Buddhism, and so on and so forth, right? So much, or Zen Buddhism, like Japanese Buddhism. So I feel like there is a lot of kind of cultural overtones that has been passed down, and some of the work that's been happening recently, welcome guys, some of the work that's been happening recently, and I would say last 10 years, is really starting to look at the teachings of the historical Buddha from different lenses: psychological lens, philosophical lens, mental health, physiological health, trauma informed. Like there's lots of different kind of ways in which this exploration has happened. So all that to say, tonight, what I'm going to do is actually blend a little bit of some of my training, as I often do, but I'm going to actually share a handout. And I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but I can literally share it to everyone. I have a monitor here for those of you who are in the room, and then there is the the sharing of the screen here on Zoom, and then that will be recorded for folks in the future. So we're going to go through this bit of a psychological lens, where I'm going to be talking about kind of what we would call small self, and then this larger sense of self, or even the not self strategy, right? So that's kind of the framework. And I'm also going to talk about some suffering and freedom from suffering, and regular things that I normally talk about. So just to kind of give a little intro. All right, so while I've been talking, a few more people have come in the room, and I'm not sure if there's anyone else on Zoom, but does anyone wish to introduce themselves? That's maybe their first time here. Okay. All right. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. So let's go ahead and sit. Let's meditate for a period of time. So it's a good idea to find a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, one where you can feel relaxed and alert. Of course, this concept of meditation has kind of twofold. One is to kind of calm the nervous system and to focus the attention. And we're really training the mind to be less reactive and more responsive to life circumstances. Mhm. So keeping that in mind, just allowing the eyes to close, be downcast. If you're not comfortable with the eyes closed, you can just allow them to be downcast. Good, and maybe just taking a few deeper breaths. Really kind of exaggerating the inhale, filling the lungs completely, and then exaggerating the exhale, softening the belly, and just kind of arriving here, preparing the body, mind for meditation. An opening to the comings and goings of sound. Sounds outside the room. Sounds inside the room. So as we settle in, maybe saying some simple recognition of here. Maybe using that in your mind as a way to assist the mind to inhabit the body. Here. This sitting, breathing body. The invitation is to aim the attention towards this experience of breathing, to connect wherever you find it's easiest to connect. Could be the tip of the nose or the rise and fall of the belly, wherever really there's an easy sense of connection. And then the last piece is to sustain that connection, that observation for as long as possible. Very simple. Here, this breath, in, out. Of course, the attention may wander off. That's not a problem. Just acknowledging where the attention has gone. And with that sense of friendliness, kindness with the mind, aim, connect, sustain, again and again. Breathing in, know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, know that you're breathing out. Of course, thoughts and feelings and sensations, sounds are all continuing to arise, stay for a time, and pass away. Yet the training is to allow that to take place in the background of the mind, while keeping in the foreground. Aim, connect, sustain. As we collect the attention, cultivating mindful awareness of breathing. Of course, the attention will wander off with as much friendliness and kindness as possible. Aim the attention back, connect with the experience of breathing, and sustain that connection again and again. The invitation here is to continue to collect the attention, perhaps calming the busyness of the mind, concentrating or focusing specifically on the aiming, connecting, and sustaining of attention towards the experience of breathing. The invitation moving forward is to begin to expand, perhaps soften and widen the instructions. So just taking a little bit more of a relaxed approach, observing the overall present time experience and allowing whatever arises to both just be and pass away in its own time. So shifting to relax, observe, allow. Each breath, each moment, relaxing any tension, observing the 6 sense doors, and allowing any thoughts, feelings, sensations to arise and pass away, or just be as they are. Relax, observe, allow. All right. So I'm gonna, sometimes I'm giving more of a kind of a freelance, kind of open discussion talk, uh, where I'm gonna change things up a little bit. I'm gonna be a little bit more focused, and then the hope is that once I kind of give the information, and I'll be talking about a couple things, then I'll open up, or we'll have some small groups for discussion, and then open up to the larger group for any questions. So we'll just kind of do that. Let me go ahead and share. Well, before I share this screen, this handout, let me give you a little bit of context. I worked for a private nonprofit in Northern California for about 15 years. And the leadership had a lot of emphasis on cross-cultural communication. I think it was commonly called, I don't even know what it was called. I can't really remember what it was called. Competency, like cultural competency, is what it was kind of commonly spoke, and sometimes still in the business world, it's still kind of called this. Or now it's often thought about as equity training, racial equality. So cross-cultural communication was a training developed by one of my mentors, whose name is Lillian Roble Rose. And Lillian Roble Rose was a activist for a Latina, and for much of her kind of earlier life was an activist, and then became kind of a political figure particularly in kind of field workers' rights and rights of non-resident immigrants, or I guess now it's called DACA. These things change as the political climate changes. But there was a big emphasis on understanding cross-cultural communication. And I was, actually, to be fully honest, I was quite illiterate. I was quite unaware of my own privilege for definitely going in, and identified with an oppressed group right away. And it was useful to have this cross-cultural communication and understanding to begin to see the different nuances to what we call privilege. And anyway, I'm using this as a context to talk about the handout that I'm going to present, which is a psychological view that Lillian Roble Rose presented, which to me really identifies when we have what is called kind of core developmental trauma, or core aspects that get interrupted in, whether it's relational or developmental, just kind of in our lives, and then like how that plays out. And there's a little bit of kind of connection that I'll make to why it was presented in cross-cultural communication training. Basically as a way of also seeing systems of oppression. So I'm going to show this first. It's two models. This is called reevaluation counseling. The first model is really, let me just share. The first model is So you guys should all be able to see. All right, so where we start is, this is considered the nature of human beings from the reevaluation model. So what is a fully functioning human being? Well, I don't really know, but this model makes some assumptions. And regardless of your conditioning, my hope is that you can just kind of look at the model as it is to explain a particular component. So this model basically says that we are born innately, this inner circle, we have these qualities. These are just representations of what are basically in Buddhism what we call original goodness. So innately born a sense of ability for intelligence. This could be emotional intelligence, this could be intellectual intelligence. This isn't just IQ, this isn't just learning how to read, this is about understanding, right? There's a sense of curiosity that this model suggests we're all born with. There is a sense of goodness, or even good enoughness, or what I like to call original goodness, that we are born with. This is a core sense of self. And now we're talking about loving, zest, the exuberance of life. When you think about children, before that era where you see hurts and mistreatments, there generally is a lot of zest and quality of life and loving, and also a sense of pride. Now, pride can cut both ways, right? There's a sense of pride that we could very easily call self-worth, self-esteem. And then there is a kind of pride that is a little bit more kind of arrogant, self-importance, that is generally considered not helpful or not skillful. So this is the model. This model is basically saying, like, there's a core sense of self that develops. And the outer circle is what babies and what the body naturally protects, or a natural way of discharging hurts and mistreatments in our lives. We are all going to experience hurts and mistreatments in our life. Of course, you know this because this has already happened hundreds of times. Now, this model, as the fully functioning human being, says that by learning to cry, laugh, yawn, shake, talk, sweat, the body naturally discharges hurts, mistreatments, emotional discharge. It's an emotional discharge to protect this kind of core sense of self. And in this process of learning and growing emotionally, and here's an example of that. An example of that would be a 5-year-old is running and trips. They're in front of their parents. They trip and they scrape their knee, right? And that child will perhaps begin to cry and shake and kind of they're just, well, maybe they'll start sweating, maybe but there will be some emotional discharge, and then that is a natural process. Now, what the parents do or the adults do in response to that is huge. Sometimes there will be an empathetic response, a mirroring, a connection, are you okay? I think you're going to be okay. Let me kiss your boo-boo. Let's get you a Band-Aid, like something like that. And then very often a child will actually regulate themselves very quickly. There is self-regulation that we're talking about all of the, crying, sweating, talking, yelling sometimes. And then there is the co-regulation of another, usually a caretaker, and their response. Now let's just assume that, or let's not assume, but let's say that that parent didn't respond that way, but perhaps responded a different way. What might that look like? What might be an example of where this co-regulation doesn't take place? Any thoughts?
Ignoring the child.
Yeah, ignoring the child.
Getting angry at the kid.
Getting angry at the kid. What? Oh, I can't believe you fell. Like, you need to be more careful, right? What else?
Suck it up, like, get it together, don't cry.
Yeah. What are you crying about? Like, you're okay. You're good. You're all right.
Like, get it, that's
Walk it off. Yeah, right. So it's dismissing the self-soothing self-regulation. Right. Good. So I think you guys can understand what we're talking about here and how this can be misaligned very, very easily. And this is, it's very often, this is like, it's not that this is something, this is something that happens regularly, and it's not that it's totally damaging if this happens one time, but if there is a kind of general approach or misalignment to parents, to kids, or to society, that this can really take a hold. So in this model, this says that the way that this happens is that there's hurts and mistreatments in the world. And there's all various kinds of hurts and mistreatments, and that our natural ability to defend our core sense of self around these hurts and mistreatments is to learn ways to discharge and to self-regulate and to co-regulate, which then leads to the other side of the circle there, the creative and appropriate responses to future incidents of hurts or mistreatments. So this is how we kind of learn, and this is how we learn how to deal with life's problems. This is one model. This is the ideal model. For most of us, well, let me just kind of open up for any questions that you might have about this, this model. This is kind of the ideal. This is, if all things go well, there is an intact core sense of self that develops in a baby, in an infant, in a toddler, in a child, in a young person, in a young adult, in an adult, right? And gets kind of protected through natural ways to discharge. Now, what are some of the other, we gave a little bit of example, but what if we interrupted this process? If we interrupted this process, let me make it a little bit bigger. A little bit smaller. There we go. If we interrupted this process, then we get into what we call dysfunction, right? So what is dysfunction? Well, the natural defense mechanisms that we have gets interrupted somehow. The ability to discharge gets interrupted. So what might that look like? What might be some examples of that? Well, yeah, so absolutely drug abuse. That's a little bit down on the, where it says patterns of behavior against self. That's kind of the result. But what tends to happen first is that there is some discounting of the discharge system. So never let them see you sweat, right? I'll give you something to cry about. Why are you laughing? This is not a joke. Basically everything I got in trouble for all through junior high school, probably most of 5th, 6th grade, definitely, of elementary school, were all of my ways of trying to discharge hurts and mistreatments I had experienced or was experiencing in my life, and then was constantly told, and by the school system, by the police, by the parents, by the teachers, how none of this was okay, right? And priests, like there was always, you know what I'm saying? Like it was interrupted, right? boys aren't allowed to cry. That was something I was, told, like explicitly told and implicitly told. Never let him see you sweat. Don't let people know that you're nervous. Like basically discount your own anxiety or your own fear. Laughing inappropriately. I think that this is why comedy is so relieving and helpful and freeing, and why so many comedians actually who have gone through their own tragedy have learned, like really good comedians learn how to take tragedy and turn it into comedy. So it's like uncomfortably inappropriate, yet super fucking funny, right? I mean, I've seen, like, Bill Burr is one example of someone who does that, right? Takes these kind of, really difficult subjects and then allows humor when maybe it would feel inappropriate, but yet we're all agreeing that it's okay to laugh about these kinds of things, right? And so on. So some, like, yawning also has a negative connotation. How many people yawn and then apologize for it? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get enough sleep last night. Yawning is an emotional discharge. Crying is there was a study done around the physiology of tears, and that physical pain tears, tears that come out of the tear ducts due to physical pain, and emotional pain physiologically are different. They have different structures. Some would say the emotion in the kind of emotionally, in the emotional tears, I guess, the emotion is part of the chemical difference, right? So there's literally a discharge that comes out. Okay, so when these, aspects of who we are and our natural defense mechanisms get shut down, get avoided, then we begin to become vulnerable. And the hurts and mistreatments, we don't have ways to discharge, and it begins to affect, as it's showing in the model, cutting kind of through this core sense of self. And so just think for a moment, and maybe you guys have an example. Do you guys have any examples of, what would it mean if somebody's sense of intelligence or curiosity or goodness or love or ability to love, or zest or pride was affected by hurts or mistreatments? What might develop? Like how? Like in what ways? Can you guys think of any kind of example?
Like shut that aspect of their personality down.
Yes, right. Like curiosity, like might shut down the idea of curiosity. But to be curious, to be a child and to be curious, what's one of the things that happens? There's an openness, right? There's a questioning also. Now, if authority, right, parents, cops, teachers, whatever, shut that down, then there might be a like, oh, like I'm not allowed to be curious, right? There can be a dampering of that. And that can affect someone's curiosity, someone's kind of natural, curious nature. Yeah. Any other examples? Yeah.
Our likeness, and it's like, I think in life you're taught sometimes, and I relate, like you can never make a mistake. And it's wrong to make a mistake.
Right. So and where do you feel like that would affect?
It's make you just like, that creates a lot of like self-loathing or unrealistic expectations for yourself, or you're always, because you're never perfect and you naturally never are perfect, right? There is no true right. Then to admit this to oneself is such a grand judgment, and therefore it's basically saying, if I were to admit this, that at heart, I'm unworthy, and therefore wrong for my natural instinct.
Yes. So let me just kind of point that back to with that sounds like it affects a sense of goodness.
Yeah, or just like to exist is to be judged so harshly, to be like a fear of punishment 24/7. or
Abs-
your natural
abs-
instinct,
yes.
and also as the own fear of making mistakes, you shut down your own identity
Yes.
or ability to sit in your own emotions,
Right.
because this overwhelming fear.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
you're
pretty much
you're jumping ahead a little bit. But you're right. You're absolutely right. That's what we're talking about. Is that this core sense of self, when it gets damaged or interrupted, or there is some negative core belief that develops of I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve love. These are negative core beliefs that develop when? Usually in childhood, right? So let me just give some Buddhist kind of references here. The first arrow of Buddhism says the first arrow found within the teaching of the Buddha around the two arrows is that there are hurts and mistreatments in life. The pain of the first arrow of life, unavoidable, inescapable. It's just the way things are here. First noble truth, right? There is suffering in this world. Right? Now, the second noble truth is that there is a cause to the suffering, selfish, kind of self-centered craving. Now, what's being pointed to here is that once this system gets interrupted, there is patterns of behavior against self and then against our own group that start to develop. Now, what are some examples, if you have any examples of ways in which we might kind of, if this core sense of self has been interrupted, what might we turn these patterns of behavior towards ourselves if we're not able to discharge them? Yeah, anything online there? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, behavior against self might include addiction.
Absolutely, yes. That's a huge aspect of it is addiction. Also, self-harm, suicidality, depression, extreme amounts of anxiety, all play out in this kind of interruption of this kind of core sense of self. Yes, thank you for that. Go ahead. Did you want to say something, Christine?
Yeah, I would also say that one of the patterns of self-harm would be that you don't try things that would be enlivening, that you withdraw and become less than what you could be.
Yes, right. So, and that's part of that zest for life. That's part of that shutting down of that exuberance or that zest or that, the curiosity. Yeah. Yeah. And even the pride is a kind of a point of confidence, right? So there's a confidence in trying new things. All these things get shut down in different ways for different people based on situations, right? Now, a lot of us recover from this. Yeah. And recognizing that this is part of the process. The second arrow is the pattern against self or our own group that we talk about. So, which is so the first arrow is the arrow of pain that life is going to give us. The second arrow is the arrow of suffering that we take and we stab ourselves with as a way to avoid the pain of the first arrow instead of attending to the wound. Okay. So I want to just use this, take this last little piece here, re-stimulation. Things that remind us of hurts or mistreatments. Re-stimulation. Okay, so this original kind of wound or disruption has kind of entered, and we do what we can. We struggle along. We, find ways to get through, to survive, because we've all survived this long. So we've done that for some very, in some very particular ways. Right? And some of that is what's been talked about. Maybe it's shutting down a sense of curiosity, or focusing on the things that we actually do still have access to, like maybe it's intelligence, Oh, well, if I don't feel good enough in these areas, or lovable, or, confident, I am going to excel in intelligence. And so then we become kind of lopsided sometimes. There's more of a rational minded versus kind of integrated or wise mind. So I don't want to lose people. So I'm gonna kind of wrap this up, and then we'll have some more discussion about it. But this re-stimulation is really my favorite way of talking about what we commonly gets referred to, at least in pop psychology, as triggers. I'm triggered. I'm sorry, but that triggered me, is actually highly inaccurate. That it's really more like I was re-stimulated by what happened in my present experience based on what has happened to me in the past that I have not resolved. Do you hear how that's different? I was re-stimulated. So it's just, it's a change of just speaking about the same thing. If I'm re-stimulated, then that means that is on me. If you triggered me, then that is on you. That's not me taking any responsibility for being triggered, right? So I just feel like there's a way in which this has been, kind of misunderstood, and to me, I just prefer re-stimulation. Like I'm re-stimulated. I'm re-stimulated because of this, that, or the other thing reminds me, causes and conditions of past experience of, let's call it, unhealed trauma, right?
Why can't they both exist together? I mean, the things that trigger us, we're aware of triggers as we encounter them through life, but then we just acknowledge that we're being re-stimulated and take it to the same place you just said.
Yeah, well, I feel like the re-stimulation, and I don't disagree, I think that it's the same thing. It's both and. The thing that has happened, though, is that pop psychology and we'll call it internet psychology has started to make everything a trigger. And that triggers are now the world's responsibility, not my responsibility to deal with. In other words, if you're triggering to me, then you need to do something to not trigger me, which is it's just not possible, first of all. And then that puts it on the world and not on myself to acknowledge, the reality of being re-stimulated based on past experience, right? Does that make sense?
It does, but that doesn't seem like a natural way to deal with it, though.
Well, right, because we like to blame other people for our problems.
That's what it doesn't seem natural.
Yeah.
I bet maybe because I've been through so much recovery.
Yeah.
It's obviously not the case.
Yeah, well, again, this is a model, and I'm just presenting this as a way of what I love about meditation is that meditation helps us to recognize when we become re-stimulated, and to help us actually kind of move through the stories in our mind and allow the unhealed or unprocessed kind of maybe memories or emotions to come up, and that we can begin to digest them, dissolve them, resolve them, right? So that's part of what's happening here. And that also might mean attending, crying or laughing or yawning or doing some action that is going to complete that process that maybe got interrupted at a different time in the past when we didn't feel like we could. A lot of times a good example of this is people begin to shut down, so they dissociate as a way to survive what feels overwhelming. Let's say an alcoholic or angry father, right? And a small child will learn to dissociate, shut down, go numb, disappear as a way to survive that moment. And then that becomes a habitual pattern. And then anyone that reminds them of this kind of anger, overwhelming, will re-stimulate, and then that dissociation will continue to happen, right? So the work to be done there would be to allow that to complete, allow that healing to take place. And this is where reevaluation counseling comes into play. And this is where meditation comes into play. Please.
How do you think about the difference between like controlling your own mind and your reaction to something and calling for change? Kind of goes back to like what he was saying around like getting triggered. So like let's say someone had an eating disorder and they spend a lot of time recovering or healing that part of themselves. But they'll see a lot of triggers because we live in a society that, you know, pushes a certain image or talks about weight, anything like that.
Yes.
Like that isn't to say that, oh, this is re-stimulating that person who recovered. I feel like is almost not acknowledging like the work that they did and allowing this like more toxic culture to continue.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I'm a little unclear as to where you started. You started with controlling your mind and...
Yeah, I think it's like, so if something, or like, what is, when we say like, oh, something re-stimulated, this reaction,
something...
the solution is to like, you know, deal with the internal struggle and not be affected by it. And then another solution could be like speaking up, because maybe it was like a toxic trigger and that behavior needs to stop. Like, how do you think about?
Well, in terms of food, that's tricky, right? Yet if it, so what you're kind of saying is personal boundaries, like, oh, when is it appropriate to set a boundary and recognize, if I'm hearing you correctly, when's it appropriate to set a boundary and recognize, please don't offer me, you know, donuts. Like I don't eat sugar, you know, this is an issue for me. If you could respect that, that would be setting a boundary, right? That would be letting your preferences known, you're kind of speaking out, right? Versus what? Trying to change the food industry completely or the advertising industry? Like how else would that, like where else is the locus of control besides within ourselves?
Or I guess like another example could be if someone was struggling with depression and like was suicidal, and they see on the internet like people jokingly say like, oh my God, kill myself. Right? Like
Which people say and do all the time.
And like on one hand, that person could just like deal with it internally and not be affected by those comments, but they could also like speak up and be like, hey, this is really inappropriate. So I guess I'm just curious, like, which was more impactful?
I think both. I think that, again, to be able to set the boundary and to feel empowered to name what's true, and then also do the work internally, that it's not that we're not going to get triggered in the world. Like that's the thing, we are. And so to expect the world to change is just causing more suffering. And instead to be able to really look at, okay, why is this so triggering for me? And then do that work is really what this model is kind of pointing to. Not that it's not important to create societal change, it is, but it's not society's responsibility. It's our responsibility to do the work for ourselves. And this is directly what Buddhism is pointing to, which is that you are the cause of your suffering and the salvation to the freedom from your suffering, all right here. And it's really up to us, like how I love what you're saying. I mean, that's a great question. And this is, of course, my opinion. I'm just giving you my opinion based on, there is someone who I think wants to comment, but yeah, that's where I feel like these two things merge, where this model is saying, okay, like let's acknowledge that there is hurts and mistreatments, and we have been conditioned societally to maybe avoid or not take responsibility for certain aspects of it, our own healing. And then, so let's do that work so that we can then hopefully create a positive change in the world through doing our own work, right? That's kind of the view that I have about it. Christine, do you have something you want to add to this, or is it a different thought?
No, I'm just going to share that I like the term re-stimulation better than trigger, because even the word trigger is a weapon.
It's triggering.
So we're weaponizing things that cause our own responses.
Mhm.
And it may never have, it very likely was never intended to be a weapon. It's
Mhm.
just something that is our own personal bullet.
Right.
And again, we can't hold others responsible for what our triggers are, because it could be the color pink. It could be, you never know what somebody else's triggers are going to be.
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. Like that's kind of, I hear what you're saying. That was kind of the point that I was trying to make there. Yeah. Go ahead. Thoughts, questions, rejections, rebuttals.
Question, so what is like the solution? I always see that these kind of posters, and so I always identify with them. I would say put up a picture up there if you want. What's the solution? I guess using self-work, meditation, reevaluation.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, good point. Yeah. Like why does this fucking matter? Right. Well, it matters because if we can begin to at least see, people ask me all the time, why? Like, why meditate? Why does this happen? Why am I the way I am? Why am I addicted? Why? There's always so much why. This is a little bit of the why. This is the answer to the why. And what you're asking is how, which is actually a more important question. The why is useful, but the how do we move forward? How do we heal? How do we participate in a different way? Part of it is to see the pattern. And this is what I like about the re-stimulation piece, because so mindfulness meditation is helping us. So let me just give you this last kind of model. So this is I got this model from, well, I mean, it's psychoanalytic. It's Freudian psychoanalytic view with a Buddhist overlay from Ayatollah Loka, who is a Bhikkhuni that I've been friends with for a really long time. And what she said is, she studied neuroscience before she became a nun. She said, we have kind of three minds. We have a conscious mind, we have a subconscious mind, we have an unconscious mind. This is also what Freud and every other psychoanalytic theorist has also confirmed for years. And when we meditate, we actually lower the ability of our conscious mind, or we can say expand the ability of our conscious mind to move from conscious thought to subconscious thought. Subconscious thought is what is motivating our reactions, our emotions, is what's motivating our these negative core beliefs that are limiting, that we've believed since we were in childhood, right? So by learning to meditate, by expanding our ability, our consciousness, right, we are gaining access to that which is subconscious and bringing into view that which has previously been unconscious. This is what's happening in meditation. This is what's happening during concentration, mindfulness, really just the instructions I gave tonight. So that process, more will be revealed, and there's an unraveling, hopefully, there's an unraveling of seeing the original hurt and mistreatment versus the re-stimulation. See, we can focus on the re-stimulation all the time because that's what we're actually seeing. Oh, these people do, make me feel this way, or this happens, and that's what I was saying about the trigger thing. So the re-stimulation and kind of recognizing, oh, so there's something that's being re-stimulated in me based on this external reaction. So what can I do differently, or what needs to be healed, or what do I have to kind of point to? And mindfulness can help us access some of that, and as well as the heart practices, compassion, loving kindness, forgiveness. Is that helpful? As kind of a talk a little bit about the why? The how?
Definitely, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I love that. I wouldn't have even thought of it if you didn't ask the question. So I'm glad that you asked the question about this conscious, subconscious, unconscious. When Ayatollah Loka said this to me, it was like a fucking light bulb went on. I was like, oh, that's what's been happening. Because what would happen is I would sit in meditation, and then all of a sudden I would remember something from 10 years old. And I'd be like, oh shit, what's that? Oh, it's something unresolved that my subconscious is letting me know. Maybe this is something you should be thinking about or working on, right? Processing, going into therapy, writing about, doing some trauma resolution therapy towards, right? This is one of the amazing benefits of meditation. Most people don't even know that that's what happens during meditation. Of course, if you do, because you've been sitting for a while and you've seen, oh, wow, there's this random shit pops in my head. Not just songs from 1989, but it's, random shit from our life and experience. Could be from the day, could be from 10 years ago, could be from yesterday, right? And so being receptive to what that experience is like and what needs to be attended there. I think this is the emotional intelligence found here within Buddhism, Buddhist practice, and Buddhist theory. Yeah.
Can you put that back up?
Yes. Sorry.
So I like what Cynthia said about the term triggers. I never thought of it as sort of a weaponizing, sort of aggressive thing. I was thinking of it more like a switch, electronic switch or a button. Pushing a button, that might be a better way to put it.
Yeah. You're pushing my button.
Yeah. But I think the issue I'm having is a lot of stuff I hear in here is very theoretical. This is what we do, and this is kind of what happens, and that's because this is, all around us or whatever. And I think when we discount triggers or buttons in particular, specifically, in my experience, that cuts down. That's how wisdom is gained. You run into a specific button, specific trigger, you feel a specific way, you understand by either talking to somebody or meditating or whatever, you understand why that stimulates you, what wound maybe that's reactivating, and then you learn how to discharge.
Yeah.
But I think if it's just leaving it up there as re-stimulation, it just seems too broad to me. And for me personally, I don't learn unless somebody's like, no, it's like 1 + 1 = 2. It's not like mathematics. It's like there's a way to break it down, and that's by getting those little increments of lessons, little pieces of intelligence, wisdom, is how I can build up and understand something as broad as re-stimulation. So that was my point, is I think the value is to keep both of those very defined, But the tendency in our culture, I think, is to put that off on other people, like it's coming from outside, and seek an exterior solution. But I still think it's important to not go all the way the other way and just feel like it's all entirely me. I agree that's how we have to deal with it ultimately, but it's still a reaction to a stimulus from outside.
Yeah, assholes aren't going to stop being assholes just because we're triggered by them, right?
Or needy mothers won't stop being needy mothers,
Yes, right.
The assholes,
Yes, right. Regardless, but that I hear what you're saying, and I think both, which is what I was trying to kind of I was trying to present when you brought it up around the difference between trigger and restimulation, and this is a big thing, and it's a little bit of a button for me because I work in the mental health field, and what I do is I hear people talk about going around in the world saying, I'm triggered here, I'm triggered there, I'm triggered here, and then the whole world is a trigger.
You're
And
triggered by the word trigger.
that's right. I get triggered by the word trigger, right? And so, but what's true is that, this is to give it an example, there's something is re-stimulated in me around people not taking personal responsibility for their way of walking in the world. And so I think both things are true. The triggers are there, absolutely, and we will be triggered. And what you said, this is the whole point here. What you said is to be able to identify and to not move into the patterns of behavior towards self or our own group. Now, this is something I didn't even mention. Our own group can mean others that are like us, or can mean a lot of, in the way that this was taught to me also, is that, this also can look like internalized oppression, where we begin to judge others who have even similar experiences, or put down, like I hear this a lot with trauma, like people that have trauma, that they're like, oh, well, I have serious trauma, and that person's just kind of complaining, right, about whatever, not being breastfed as a baby, like there's something like, I mean, literally I've heard such stuff like that. So a discounting, kind of in the same way you're talking about the difference between a trigger and the word re-stimulation, right? So to not discount, but to actually just, this is the hope is to be more inclusive here, and to begin to recognize that all of us can repair what has been ruptured, and this means and this means kind of connecting to and healing the wounds that have originally affected our inner circle, our core sense of self. Yes, last thought.
I think that there is no one answer
Hmm.
in life, and I think that life is very complex,
Mm-hmm.
and it's less like black and white, but you can only gain like growth
Mhm.
out of beginning to try to do something.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's like there
Right.
is no absolute one answer or absolute way of doing anything, and there never will be. It's
Mhm.
just kind of like a process of, okay, maybe I have this profound thought, it's very exciting, it speaks to something, others can relate,
Mm.
and but I don't fully grasp it, because even though it's simple, it's stuck on something complex that
Yeah.
I can only gain insights or continue to strengthen a practice by practicing and making mistakes and
Mhm.
taking in feedback.
Yeah.
It's never going to be, oh, this is it. It's like, oh, this is a start, and then I build. And then
Right,
eventually I have, a good wall.
Mm. Yeah, no, good point. And I feel like this is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. From a Buddhist perspective, we can understand concepts, and that is knowledge. And the concepts or the knowledge put into experience, meditative experience, study experience, life experience, translates to wisdom, hopefully, but not always, and that wisdom is always changing. What was wise 10 years ago is not wise anymore. There's a new wisdom. The bar is constantly being raised, right? Now, that being said, a 2,568-year-old wisdom found here within the practice of Buddhism tends to still hold up, and more is being revealed all the time, kind of to your point, right? And I love, like, one of the things I love about the Dalai Lama is the Dalai Lama got all these scientists together and these neurologists and these psychologists and said, let's try to prove or disprove what's found in the teachings of the Buddha. And what happened more, and then actually what he said is, even if there's, you know, some rituals or some practices found within Buddhism that can't be proven by science, then we will discard it. We would talk about kind of letting it go as a cultural overlay. And I found that to be like so so much humility that the Dalai Lama had to kind of say this, the leader of Tibetan Buddhism, right? And then also so much confidence in saying what we are doing here is so important, and it makes so much sense that let's hold it to the test of science. I don't know any other religion that has done that. Any other religion in my, you know, limited experience of religions. So yeah, so this is a model. It's a model that I felt would blend nicely in talking about the benefits of meditation, helps us to create creative and appropriate responses to the old hurts and mistreatments that have been unattended, and that creating now this is a trigger word for some people, creating a core sense of self, which is necessary in order to, from the Buddhist perspective, dissolve the self.
And a shield, right?
And reconnecting the shield, yes, of learning how that it's okay to cry, and it's okay to laugh, and it's okay to yawn, and to do, and you know, these are examples that then we translate into what? Yoga and exercise, and you know, doing other things that are regulating, self-soothing. This is necessary for us. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, 'cause so sensitive, my inner child, I just reawakened, I feel so good, but now someone says, yeah, oh, fuck you, and fuck your other child.
Right,
and
right.
like our sensitivity and vulnerability, and then instantly,
Yeah.
so it's like good to know, when do I have the zest of life, and when do I choose not to share this, and when I am attacked in my state of inner child, how can I defend myself appropriately?
Yeah, and that's part of it is, yeah, how do we have that solid sense of self, where some of these core elements gets they can get strengthened. Good. So I think we'll end here. I guess, I don't know, what about for those of you online? Thoughts, questions, reflections? Maybe someone that hasn't shared to anyone in the room or online yeah.
Thanks for the reflections. And something that just kept coming to mind relative to Buddhism and the intersectionality with psychology is just the invitation is to, like, in meditation, is to turn towards things with, you know, some of the divine abodes, like self-kindness, self-forgiveness. And you brought up something that I recall, something being on retreat and having a really rough memory arise out of nowhere. And it was because of the teachings of the Buddha, that instead of disassociating, instead of getting angry or judging or shutting down, or like getting into mental battles of siege mentality or opinion wars, I could just kind of, like, I could breathe and turn toward it. And that was, and I really, and I know we've talked about this before, I felt it move through. I felt, and that still happens in meditation, is that these things that, like the book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? These things stay locked up.
Yeah. And
I found, like, in my own direct experience, limited direct experience with meditation, is that it works, you know, and when you have that confidence through doing it and showing up, it just, you can, like, move through these things. And I feel like the Eightfold Path and
the three marks of existence, all the stuff, get you back, like you've said on many occasions, that original goodness, you know. And then you talked about things constantly changing, like impermanence, one of the three marks of existence. Just something 10 years ago isn't, you know, as applicable or skillful as the new things that are evolved, the new ways of thinking, you know, like new spacious, receptive ways. This path has just made me more receptive and spacious, and I can hold space for different opinions and not cling to them or get into siege mentality. It's like,
Yeah.
I just have a lot of I have a lot of gratitude for the generosity of the reflections in the room from everybody tonight. And like, I'm finding I don't take things as personal as they used to from anything.
Right.
It's just, there's just so much gratitude
Yeah.
and belief. And I'm a hater, a straight up hater. Like I was misinformed by the misinformed, and everything sucked before I even tried it. The one thing about Buddhism is that it's not doctrinal. The invitation is just see for yourself.
Yeah.
See how it lands.
Right.
Does it work? Does it hold up?
Yeah.
You know? So
Mm-hmm.
it just, I felt like the reflection and the guidance that was just skillful, and it was super helpful.
Great. Oh, thanks. Yeah. And, you know, and I'm trying to do something a little bit different, presenting a little bit more of a Western psychological view, and then bringing some of the kind of Buddhist approaches to it. And, you know, hopefully that was helpful for people. I'm open to hearing feedback if it wasn't. Knowing that this center is run on the donation of those who attend, there's a bowl at the desk with a QR code if you want to make a donation to this center. The suggested donation is $15 per time that you come here. Of course, you know, no one is, you know, this is a donation center, and that no one's excluded for lack of payment. And the other thing is true, that my teachings and my work as a teacher is completely done out of generosity. And if you want to be reciprocal in that way, then you can Venmo me at No BS Buddhist or Jason Murphy. Yeah, so let's just take all the goodness of our practice and first take in the goodness to our own hearts and minds, our own freedom from suffering. And then expanding out in all directions. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free from suffering.